Okay. So, from yesterday, what we talked about was how to find slope. And we came up with a process. And we said the slope is always change in y. And by the way, sorry about the squeakiness. I realized that afterward, and I just didn't have time to go back and fix it. So, no squeakiness today. Change in y over change in x, that's our slope. I said start from left to right, so starting here. How far up did I go? I went up 1. That's my change in y. How far over did I go? That's my change in x. And that was our slope, 1 over 2. Okay. And we went up, so that's positive. So yeah. But what if, because really, we have 2 points here, right? What are those points? Let's find them here. We got 0, 0. That's a nice one. 0, 0. And then we have, what is this? 2, 1. 2, 1. So let me move this stuff out of the way here. Great. There we go. So we have 0, 0, and 2, 1. Now, what do you notice about those numbers? Our slope is 1 over 2. We know that. We found that yesterday. But check out the change in y. The change in y is 1. How... Oh, I guess I should put a 1. How could we get that without the graph? What if I just gave you these 2 points? What do you notice? How far did we go on the y? Well, we went from 0 to 1. Where do you see that in your points? 0 to 1. And then where do we see this change in 2 on the x? Well, look at the x's for your points. I'll do that in blue. 0, 2. And so there's a way that we can find the slope without the graph. And so let me show you that. And it's just subtraction. I mean, look, we went from 0. On the y, we're going from 0 to 1. 0 to 1. And that's like addition or subtraction, right? 0 plus 1 is 1. And then on the x, we went from 0 to 2. 2. So let me show you something here. We have a new formula. And it's essentially the same thing as change in y over change in x. I can actually delete that. My points were 0, 0, and 2, 1. So check this out. Change in y over change in x. Now, this doesn't really help us the way it's written now. But watch this. Here's a subtraction problem to help you with the same thing. Now, you might see this formula. What this says, and by the way, these numbers right here, these are not exponents. They're not exponents. They're basically just symbols to represent, okay, if we call, and actually let me move this over. If we call this point right here, each point has an x and a y. If we call this x1 and x2, they're just labels. They're just labels to say, this is my point, and here's y1, and here's y2. They're just numbers to say, this is my x and y for this point. This is my x and y for this point. But what it basically says is, in order to find the change in y, without a graph, all we have to do is subtract. Let me pick a different color here. Subtract our y's for each point. So subtract 0 and 1. Now, the order doesn't matter. I could do 1 minus 0, or I could do 0 minus 1. But whichever order you pick. So I'm going to pick 1 minus 0. If I pick that order, I went from this point to this point, right? So when I go to do the x's, because to find the change in x, rather than count it on a graph, I'm going to subtract. And the formula is subtraction, which we'll get into in a second why that's important, or to notice that, but it's important to notice that. But 1 minus 0. So when I go from this point to this point, I have to go from 2 to 0, 2 minus 0. So the order doesn't matter, and I'll show you that in a second. But it does matter that you use the same order. So 1 minus 0 is 1, 2 minus 0 is 2. Hey, there's that slope of 1 over 2. Okay? Now, what if we did it the other way? What if we did 0 minus 1 and 0 minus 2? Because that does change it, right? You get a negative 1 over negative 2. But what's a negative divided by a negative? A positive. So you see what I mean? The order doesn't matter in the sense that if I go from the 0 point to the 1, I have to go from the 0 point to the 2. Or if I go from the 1 to the 0, I have to go from the 2 to the 0. So the order doesn't matter, but you have to be consistent. Okay? And it's up to you. If you just kind of want to feel it out, it's two subtraction problems. You subtract the y's on top, you subtract the x's on the bottom. Or I'll show you how to use this formula exactly. All right? But ultimately, if I give you 2 points, we can now find the slope. So here we go. Here are 2 points. Let's find the slope. I'm going to write down the formula. All right? Change in y over change in x. Every time I want to find the slope, I'm writing this. I said this yesterday. Get used to writing it. I don't care how much of a pain you think it is. Because if you don't write it, you might mess it up. All right. Okay. Now, the way to use this formula exactly is you would label your points x1. And it doesn't matter which one is which, but x1 and y1. Basically, it says this is point 1. This is point 1. And then for this one, I'll do it in blue here. You got x2 and y2. Okay. Because this is like my point. This is point number 2. It really is just a numbering system. And then if you do that, all you have to do is plug these in. Look, what is y2? Y2 is 16. What is y1? 8. What is x2? Well, that's 9. And what is x1? That's 20. And there you go. You do the subtraction problems. It's 2 subtraction problems. Subtract the y's from each point on top. Subtract the x's on the bottom. Now you'll see this will end up being a negative number. You got 8 on the top, and you got negative 11 on the bottom. That's your slope. Circle that, you're done. But again, if you did it the other way, you'll find the same answer. If you did it the other way, you'll find the same answer. If you decided, I'm going to do 8 minus 16 on the top. I'm going to do 20 minus 9. You'll see the negative changes places, but that doesn't matter. You only need one negative for it to be a negative number. You get the same thing. That is the same thing. It doesn't matter if the negative's on the top or the bottom. All right? Ultimately, you want to subtract the y's on top, subtract the x's on the bottom. And so it's 2 subtraction problems put into a fraction. I know that makes it sound easy, and in a way it is. It's just a matter of placing things in the right spot, keeping the order correct. It'll take a little getting used to. Let's do one more example, and then it's your turn to go. All right. Because negatives may happen. And if that happens, we got to talk about how to deal with it. All right. Again, I'm going to write the formula. Change in y over change in x. And this is just another way to write change in y over change in x. I like to write the whole thing. Ultimately, for this, if you need to find the slope with just 2 points, you can just write this. That's fine. Cool. All right. Now, I'm going to do it just by feel here. I'm not going to actually label x1 and y1 and all that. I just know that on the top, according to this formula, I have to subtract my y's. Where are my y's? Well, I'm going to do it in this one in blue. Here are my y's, 7 and negative 4. And I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go from 7 to negative 4. So 7 minus negative 4. You do want to write this. This formula is always minus. So minus a negative, we'll deal with that. It becomes a plus. But there you go. All right, now on the bottom, the x's. You're going to subtract the x's. Again, I started with 7 and went to negative 4, so I have to start here at negative 4, and subtract a negative 6. So, like I said, the order doesn't matter, but whatever you pick, you have to be consistent. Okay? Subtract the x's. I went from the first point to the second point. Subtract the y's. Went from the first point to the second point. All right, let's do some math here. Now, you might want to translate this 7 minus negative 4. 7 minus negative 4 is the same as plus, so it's like 7 plus 4. That's 11. Feel free to put that in your calculator too. Minus a negative, you'll get it. It'll do that for you. All right. The bottom, negative 4 plus 6. Essentially. Minus a negative is like a plus, so we got a 2. There you go. That's your slope. So, multitude of different ways to kind of think about it. I like to just kind of feel it out. I don't like to label my points. I like to say, okay, I need to find change in y, subtract my y's on top, find my y's, just make sure if I go from this point to this point, when I go to do my x's, I go from this point to this point. When I subtract my x's on the bottom, same order as when I subtract my y's. All right, but if you want to, feel free, label x1, y1, x2, y2, set it up like this. You'll be good to go. All right, folks, have a great day. Feel free to go back to this video and pause it and follow along. Take care.